Hey everybody, it's Jared Miller with Big Mo Motorsports here. We're going to go ahead and change the rear gear in the car. I'm going to try to do this all in one take, so forgive me if I'm fumbling a little bit here. It's just a lot easier than try to do a whole bunch of different takes and do a lot of editing to this. So, as you can see, I've got the car right here ready to go. I've got the gear that I'm going to put into the car. I've got my kind of working system here with all the tools and everything that I'm going to need. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. Essentially, I got my oil pan. I've got this is an empty thing of gear oil I use to put it back in. A funnel with a strainer in it. I use a paint strainer, medium mesh, whatever that is. That's really just to catch the chunks so that I can reuse the rear end fluid. I got my electric impact gun. I've got some spacer blocks for the rear end, 3/4 inch wrench, ratchet, 5/16 socket. This is for the drain plug on my rear end. Some of the drain plugs are 3/4, some of them are 15/16. I've got a 5/16 12-point bit here, 3/8 drive. That's for the drive shaft bolts. 1/2 inch wrench for the other half of the drive shaft bolts. 13mm socket for the pumpkin bolts, the 10 bolts on the 10 bolt. 14mm socket. That's for the drive shafts, mounting plate or the retention plate, and then the 3/4 inch drive socket. Not sure why, but I might need that. And then got a universal and an extension here. So pretty much with all of this, I should be good to go. So we are going to get started here, and I'm going to start by putting the blocks here in the back of the car. So you can see here I've got two size blocks. This block right here will actually fit under the right side, and I put it in like this underneath the axle and the frame, and that's to prop up the axle so it allows the drive shaft to not hit on the frame cross member. It allows me to freely rotate the rear end. This block, because of the proximity of my trailing arm to the frame, I can't fit one of these underneath there very easily. I've been wanting to make some steel ones of these, but the wood ones work so darn well I haven't taken the effort. So this one will go under the left-hand side here, and use that to kind of prop that up. So we'll see if I can get the camera in here and actually show you guys what we've got going on. Let's see. So you can see here that block. And I'm going to stand on the rear of the car. And it is really hard to do this while holding a camera. There. Get an idea there. This other side is going to be really hard to see. See if I can. You can kind of see where I'm going to put it. I'll put it there, and then well, we'll try this with just the one side up, I guess. Guess I didn't plan very well here. So I'm going to go here. Now that I've got the block in there, when I lift the rear end, it'll hold it up. And as you can see here, I can spin the tires and I don't get the drive shaft hitting. The only hard part about this here is that because the rear end will now be angled down this way, I might get some rear end fluid coming down the tube, which will just make it messier coming out this side. With the coupe, I never really had a problem getting that spacer back in there, so I'll have to figure something out here. Coming around to the front. So you can see here, got the front up, I've got the back up, and the rear tire spins. I wouldn't necessarily have to put the front up, but I do plan on changing my oil filter while I'm doing this, so it makes it easier, gives you more access on the side of the car. So we will come around to this side. I'm going to take the wheel off, and the goal will be to drain the rear end first. Pretty simple. I've got the drain plug down here. And it really should not be on this tight. There's no need to have this drain plug this tight. I don't know why. All right, so we've got it draining there. Let's see, now while that's working, we will start on the other side on taking out the axles. And I'm just doing that over here first because all the rest of the work will be done on the other side of the car. All right. So, these nuts that are in here are 14 millimeter. Pretty straightforward. Spin the axle, pop them out. And I think my last one here is a different size because I ran out of nuts. And we will see what I've got here. Alright, you can see I just had a regular nut on there. So, I am expecting a little bit of fluid to come out here. Put the drum on backwards. Ideally, this should be pretty easy to pull out. You shouldn't need a ton of force. Like that. If it's too hard to get out, if it takes you too much force, or if you need more force than that, then you likely have a problem with either your rear end housing being bent or your axle itself being bent. But what we've got here, and again, I'm trying to keep this lifted off. There is, if I can get this, you can see there's a seal in there, and I'm trying to not drag this axle along that seal. Doing so will damage that seal, and then and I've had several rear seals go, and that just leaks rear end fluid into your braking system and ultimately kind of ruins your night there. So we've got the long axle out. Got all that. I can see, only because I've done this probably 100 times or more, I've got a lot of dirt in here. That's obviously from my running dirt this year. So once I'm not going to blow it out, not going to clean it out right now, but once I do put the axle back in, once this is sealed up, I'll run an air hose over all that to clean all that up. So we will now go back to the other side. And we will do the same thing. Got my 4 nuts off there. Put the drum on backwards. I put the nuts on backwards too, just because they've got a flat side to them. Well, that didn't work out. So here you can see short axle, pulled it out, tried to not hit that rear seal there. And there you go. I'll set that aside. And now we are ready to get to the dirtier part. So, one of the things that I am going to do is pretty much the rest of this I'm going to be laying on my back underneath here, and to save me from having to get up and get down, I am grabbing the rear gear. I will bring it over here. I'm going to pull it out and just set it like that. All right. So, see if I'm ready. I'm going to grab a light, which normally I don't use, but I think for viewers' purposes, it might make things easier. Hopefully it doesn't make my job any harder, which it probably will. All right. So for down here, I've got my 5/16 and 1/2 inch to do the drive shaft. Got a universal and a 13 millimeter to do the pumpkin, and that should cover me on most of this. I will put down a oil absorbing mat because I know I'm going to spill oil. And I am going to now, because the rear end is drained, I'm going to clean off the old oil plug. It's kind of rounded off there. I probably need to get a new one of these. Let's see. Put this back. Move that out of the way. Alright, not as tight as I had it before. So, what I am going to do from a camera standpoint, let me see if I can. Sorry. This might actually work out better. We'll see if that works. So the first thing is taking out the 4 drive shaft bolts. And the last one. Pretty straightforward. So, let me see if this works. Normally, I would move this as far out of the way as I can here. I prefer to have this camera angle, which is actually what I'm seeing. But you can see, we'll just take these bolts off here. I'll get in here with my impact and hit all of those. And I remember why I used a short 13 millimeter instead of a deep 13 millimeter before. All right. So as you can see here, I've got all the bolts out. This is loose. Now, one of the things that I've always done is I've used paper gaskets and I've used rubber gaskets in for that rear gear. But what I found best is I use a paper gasket, but I put RTV on the housing side the first time I put it on. Not a ton. Really what it ends up being is that the paper gasket will stay stuck to the rear end housing, and since in the past I've always changed the gear, every other week or something like that, it wouldn't stick to the gear itself, it would stick to the housing, and I could just keep reusing it. And most of the time, even with 18 to 20 gear changes a year, that paper gasket would last. Ooh, pardon me, I had to sneeze there. So that's what I've done here. I am going to use a little bit of a rubber glove here, because this part will get a little bit messy. Alright. I need a shorter darn tripod. Well, we'll try this. So I'm just going to lift this up. The key is to have moved the drive shaft as far this way, and I'm just going to lift this up and move it out. I'm going to add this. Hopefully you can see that. And I've got my mat down here. Alright, so I've gotten it most of the way out. It's kind of sitting there. Now I'm just going to grab it and I lift up. And I come down. So, now I've got the old one out. And strangely enough, I had to rest the camera on the new one. Let me see if I can do this a little bit better. Alright, so now I'm literally just rolling the new one over here into place. Not new one. So that was a 358 gear. As you can see here, I'm putting a 373 in. What I will do is I'm checking the gasket here, cleaning it up a little bit, and then roll it up like this. Takes a little bit of effort. And I put it in. And that's it. Clean off my hand here, and as you can see, it's all put back on. So now I just do everything in reverse. Take off my my rubber, and of course I have to drop a nut all the way over here. Now I've found these flange nuts that I actually bought specifically for this, metric flange nuts, so I didn't need any lock washers. They actually are nylon lock washers with a flange on the end of them. I don't need to use washers, I don't need to use lock washers. I do replace them when they wear out. I probably got a bag of 100 when I bought these. So as I go throughout the season, I just kind of make sure that they are still in good condition. And one thing on the old rear end that I had, not the old one, the other rear end, you can see I had a post in here, and that's part of the casting. There's nothing you can do about that. I have actually taken all of my rear ends that have this and I tapped it, or I drilled it and I tapped it, and I put a bolt in with some RTV silicone. Some people just put silicone in there. That's fine, I guess. It didn't take too much effort for me to tap it and then put that in there with the silicone. I just had to make sure my bolt wasn't too far because the stud will actually stick into that space. But for me, that's the best way of ensuring that that stays in there and it doesn't leak or anything like that. On this rear end housing, you can see this bolt right here, or the stud right here, doesn't have that. Doesn't have the little nub on it on the rear end gear, and so I am actually short one of the nuts. And if I would have thought about that before I laid down here on the ground, I would have brought one. So that means that I need to go to the magic bag of nuts and get one. All right, of course, due to the magic of television, you didn't have to wait through all that, but I forgot that I had all my spare nuts and bolts in the trailer. So I had to go out to the trailer and get that, get a new nut there. All right, so with that, I will go through, and you don't have to crank the heck out of these. I usually tighten them down with the impact, kind of in a 2-pattern cycle here. I don't go too hard. If you over tighten them, you're probably not going to hurt a whole lot. But what I found is that the gaskets, especially if you use rubber, will leak on the bottom if you over tighten it. So I'll just come through here. And one more time around here. And that's it. So now I will go ahead and put the flange back up on there. Get you a good angle on that. Let's see, gotta grab those parts. Alright, now that I got them tightened, or I got them on there, I'll come back here and tighten them. So, got all that on there. Need to put the axles back in. So as you can see here, I'm going to clean this out a little bit. Get some of the dust out. Got my camera tripod. So I've got that in there. Put my small axle, short axle in here. Again, I'm going to try to hold it and not touch that seal. So I get this puppy to line up there. Alright, so one of the things that I do, it can be real hard to get this in here. I hold it like this. I've got my knuckles against the plate here, and I pull the spring out. And that helps get it in there. Also, really wouldn't be a Big Mill Motorsports job without a sledgehammer. So now that I've got this lined up in there, pretty good, I'll give it a couple taps until it seats. So all those are doing good. Now I'll just put my nuts back on. And invariably I drop one every darn time. All right, now that I've got all those in there, I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna snug them up. I'm going to impact them in. All right. Well, like I said on the other side here, been running dirt, so I'm gonna use an air hose and just kind of blow it out. I will also blow out the drum. And we are good to go. Right there. Now we'll put on the other side here. Takes a little bit more finesse on the long side. All right. You can see here, this is where I wanted to put the wood spacer, but for some reason I couldn't get it underneath. The rear end wouldn't go up high enough, probably because of my spring set up here. But we will take the long axle, do the same sort of thing. Get it to seat. Pull the spring back. And you can see there the, boy, that axle pushed almost all the way in, just real easy. That's a good sign. That, well, should be a good sign. That's a new axle at the beginning of the season. So that's a straight axle and that the rear end housing is doing pretty good. Alright, so we will now snug these up. Actually, use the sledgehammer just to make sure it's seated. And you can see it didn't move at all, so we're sitting pretty good there. I really need to find where to get replacement nuts for that. That's a pain to have to switch that socket around. Alright, now I'm going to blow it out. Now I will say, if I was running asphalt and I was gonna be going to a brake heavy track, I would take some sandpaper and clean up each of the shoes just to get any glaze off of them, just to give a kind of a good seat for the next race. Obviously on dirt we're not using a ton of brake, so I'm not even gonna worry about it. Pull out the drum. There we go. So now we need to put the rear end fluid in, back in, I should say. I have been that guy. I did make that mistake once. It causes a lot of damage if you don't have rear end fluid in there. So make sure you don't forget that. I will first remove the drain plug. All right. So I usually do that at the beginning just to make sure I don't forget the fluid. So I take an empty container here and I've cut the tip off. Got my funnel and I literally will just funnel it right back in. So that helps if I maybe aim the camera there. Let's see, we're getting up there. So one of the things, whenever I change my rear end gear, and again, I used to do it pretty much every other week, racing, or every week racing on asphalt, going to tons of different tracks. I generally would only put just a hair over a quart of rear end fluid in. I started when I was a newbie in the beginning, and I would fill it up till it was coming out that drain plug, which is what you do for a standard car, I think. And what I was finding was that I was getting a lot of overflow coming out the overflow tube of the rear end housing. Bad enough that it was getting all over my tires. I had to put a tube in to redirect it, which really all it was doing was getting it out onto the track, which wasn't a good thing. Talking to some smarter people, they recommended putting anywhere between a quart and a half in there. So with that, I have just decided that I'll run just a little bit over a quart. Probably is some sort of resistance gains with that, not having too much fluid. So I'm been doing that for maybe 3 or 4 years, and I've never had a problem with a rear end that actually had fluid in it. So you can see here, I caught some debris, but for the most part, we are done there. I am going to grab another quart of oil. I actually use AmSoil on everything on my car. I only buy these because AmSoil doesn't come in one of these cool containers. So I will fill this a little bit further up. With AmSoil, or with my gear lube, with new gear lube. Fill it up. We're pretty much there. So then I'll take this and I'll use this to squirt it into the rear end. And hopefully, if I have things set right. Well, you know what I'm thinking? Well, I should be fine. I usually actually do this when the car's on the ground, which means that the rear end housing is further up in the air. But for this video's purposes, I'm going to do this and make a mess. And that's because I have other things I want to do, change the oil filter in the front, so I don't want to lower the car down yet. So I've got that. I am going to put a little bit more fluid in here. I spilled some, plus I like to go a little bit more than a quart, maybe that much. Maybe more than that. That should be good. All right. Again, it is a lot easier to squirt this in when the car is on the ground, because the drain fitting is actually up above this bar. All right. So then I will put the drain plug back in. And that is really hard to do one-handed. There we go. So again, the drain plug doesn't need to be super tight. Just snug it up. I will put the wheels back on. I do need to pull out the rear end, the old rear gear, the gear we pulled out. And I made a hell of a mess down here. Normally not that much of a mess. Put down some oil absorbing mats. Really the goal is to not get any of that oil on the tires. Let's go around to the other side. And that's almost it. Now, the one thing I will do that I've made this mistake before, and that is leaving those jumper blocks in. I've actually gotten to the racetrack and went out for first practice and lost one out on first practice. So normally I would lower the car down already at this point, but I am going to see if I can. See if you can see that. I'm going to try to lift the tire up. There we go. So that's it. According to my timer on here, that was an hour, literally right on the button. A lot of that took longer because I was filming it. A little bit of problems finding that extra nut, some other things like that. On a good day, I can do that in about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. There have been times doing that at the track while it was pouring down rain. So it's not too bad. Again, this is the first time I've done this on the sedan in probably 3 or 4 years. And the coupe is much easier. really just for getting access to the back, to the rear end housing for the jumpers. That took a while. But that's it. So everything's ready to go. Again, for the next race, I'm not going to change the setup, so I'm ready to go to the next race. Just change the oil filter and we're good. So if you have any questions or comments about changing the rear end gear, if you have any ideas on how to do it better, trust me, I'm always up for better and new ways of doing things. Or if you have any ideas on other things that you'd like me to film doing maintenance-wise, please put it in the comments below. All right, thank you.